right. That's it. We are back. Oh, what's that? Why is that on? That shouldn't be there. Okay. All right, I think this is working. Welcome back, my friend June and everybody else and the kids. This is recordings for the kids, actually, for my kids. So you can be sure that I'm trying to do as accurate a job as possible. I don't know if I'll get to talk to them about this stuff because they are young. But not to delay any further, let's get on with it. All right, this show is about weed, marijuana, pot, dope, the big smoke. And we're going to talk about it because I was just online and I saw Stefan Molyneux on there talking about alcohol. And I like Stefan. He's all right. Been following him for a while. I mean, I don't agree with everything he says or anything like that, but he's bold and he says what he wants to say. But he claims to be a philosopher, and yet he's never done any drugs at all. So I'm here to provide you with a little bit more of an experience-based analysis of marijuana. And I think it's important that you guys get the straight talk because there are some both interesting things and some important things and some dangerous things that you should know about this. So here goes. First of all, weed. It's a little tricky, but all the drugs are tricky, really. That's why we're talking about them. And I'll get into why and how the effects can be misleading in just a minute. But the interesting thing about weed is that the effects change over time. That is, the way that it affects you the first time you smoke it and the next time you smoke it and then later on down the road is different. And I'm going to break it up into the different categories of when it affects you differently and how. And then so we'll get into it. So, number one, interesting. Well, okay, first let me talk about the conditions that you should strive for. That is to say, if you're going to try weed for the first time, there's some basic conditions that you should strive for in order to make your time enjoyable. First, give yourself enough time. You're going to want, the first time, you're going to want, and that's actually the second time, and I'll explain that in a second. But the second time, you're going to want a location that you're not going to have to leave until after you go to sleep and wake up at your leisure the next day. And you're only going to need about 6 hours, generally speaking. But you want the 6 hours plus the nighttime, basically, to recover. That's just what you're going to want. You're going to want a place where nobody is going to arrive or leave. It's all inclusive. Everything is fine right there. You're going to want the people. You're going to have enough supplies that is food, stuff like that. Don't give yourself any problems to deal with, anything to go do that you have to do, an errand to run or anything like that. Don't do that. The people that you with are going to be the most important choice. The first time or the second time, you're going to want to limit it to your close friends, groups of people, a small group of people with whom you have, I'm going to call intuitive communication, people who can finish your sentences. The reason for this is that your communication is going to get super squirrely. You're going to be saying things that as you're saying them, you realize that they're not quite connected to maybe what was just happening or the thoughts that you know are in your friends' heads. And you're going to want them to be able to jump to positive conclusions about what you're thinking, saying, and doing. Because you don't want there to be any miscommunication, any bad miscommunication, because there's going to be miscommunication. There's also going to be a remarkable amount of rapport, but I'll get to that in a second. So, okay, why did I say the second time? The second time, the reason is because weed has this very peculiar effect. It will not work the first time you smoke it. It just doesn't. I don't know what. There's like a priming situation that goes on, and this is just This is real. I don't know anybody who tried it the first time and it worked. It just doesn't. So you have to do it twice. That's just all there is to it. So the first time you can be just like anywhere. I mean, don't follow the rules the first time as well, and it just probably won't work. But if it does, at least you'll be in a good place. That is to say, place you don't have to leave. Nobody's arriving. All the supplies are there. You don't have to do anything. You've got like a movie. Give yourself like a movie to watch at the end. Give yourself something to do if you can, like to play some music if you're a musician, or you should have at least music to play. You should have some things to entertain yourself with. Interestingly, the weed itself is not the act. You need to keep doing things, and I'll get into that. It's going to be very important later on. But, all right. So set yourself up in a place, and then partake. Now, I'm going to give you some guidelines about the exact smoking situation. Joints suck unless you are an actual smoker, like unless you smoke cigarettes, because you won't want the heat in your throat, and it will burn your throat, and then you'll just be in some pain like that you didn't need to be in. So the best way to ingest it, and it's difficult to do the first time around, is with a bong that's filled with ice. You need at least about 6-8 inches of ice in order to cool the smoke down to the proper temperature so that it's just a nice, cool inhalation. And that also significantly reduces the expansion effect that often causes people to cough when they inhale marijuana, which again causes irritation and unpleasant throat sensations during your little trip. And you don't want that. So you should probably, like, this is weird, but if you could practice inhaling through the bong with some ice, like just the air itself, that might be efficacious. But it's just gonna be better. Or you get somebody to show you. It's gonna kind of suck the first time around or whatever. But anyway, all right. What happens the second through like the 100th time you smoke weed? The effects are going to be similar. Now, different people have different effects later on, but everybody has the same effects to begin with. And that is, and this is the truth, and this is one of the attractions and the potential very important use. When you smoke marijuana the second time through the 100th time, you're going to laugh. And in fact, you're going to laugh uncontrollably. It's going to be ridiculous. You're going to think something's wrong, maybe, because you're laughing so much. Honestly, that might be the case. Lots of things will be funny. You'll see this humor in them because they're not actually funny. If you were to record what you're laughing at and then watch it back later, you're going to be like, this is stupid. But somehow your mind is able to perceive things differently. It's not, okay. And it brings me back to Molyneux. I remember distinctly the first time I smoked marijuana in a perfectly legal setting overseas in Amsterdam, as far as you know. And I was surprised. You're shocked by the change. It is a drastic perceptual change. Something happens that's dramatic, and really it's as if someone has put a helmet on you with different sensory inputs almost. I mean, you still see and hear everything that everybody sees and hears. Like, it's not like you're hallucinating or anything, but somehow you're perceiving it differently. It's not like you're thinking it differently, but let's say people want to say things like you think faster or slower, but I don't think so. I think what happens is your focus is altered somehow. And I could be totally wrong. It's just speculation, but somehow your focus is shifted here or there or allowed to stay on something longer than it normally would have. And that gives you a different perspective. And the perspective that you're going to have the second through the 100th time that you smoke marijuana, like I said, it's laughter, other feelings that people commonly describe. Okay, this happens to just about everybody, is a peaceful feeling, togetherness with the world, rapport with the people around you in some ways. Of course, that can get messed up easily if there's miscommunication, but initially there is some sort of euphoric rapport, and this really, it feeds into religion, honestly. You can see how somebody could smoke marijuana and become religious. You can easily see that. You can see easily how the burning bush could be describing marijuana. It's not the bush that burns, it's the bush one burns, so that you can see, so that you can have this rapport with God, because it is this profound, semi-religious, it very much can be a religious experience. And that is interesting, and it is captivating. Now, the experience, the curve on the experience looks something like this, if you're familiar with. It's a very sharp initial hit, okay, when you ingest the smoke. It's very fast, unless you eat edibles, in which case it's much, much slower. But if you smoke it, you're immediately going to feel the effects. Like within 2 or 3 minutes, you're going to feel the full effects, okay? Sometimes it takes 5 to 10 minutes, but that's it. At that point, you are at the peak. And then from there, it's kind of a slow downward curve, and then you slowly reintegrate. And you won't want to be in that last part, because it's kind of confusing, because your mind is kind of going back and forth between these two states of minds. Some of your thoughts are in the one realm and some of your thoughts in the other realm, and it's best to just go to sleep. That's really what people do. And honestly, if I were to suggest a use for marijuana, what I would say is, well, should I get more into this? What I'm going to say is, if you keep the uses to under 100 lifetime, that's probably the most beneficial way. Now, also, let me divide this up right away between different types of people. There's a large group of you who should not ever touch the shit, okay? Like 35, I'm going to say 35% of people are just not going to respond to it well because of that weird focus change, because of that distraction that it forces you through. Certain people, it's difficult for me to predict which, whether they're very organized or they're very disorganized, don't do well with that. And I mean, I could kind of profile somebody out and say they're probably not going to do it. Here's what I'm going to say. You type A people, okay? You people who get up early and start doing shit immediately probably don't want to fool with it. Probably don't, okay? I'm not saying absolutely, because some of you may get fantastic relief or other euphoria through its use. But I would say, if that's your life, if you've got everything organized and everything's just banging out and you're kicking ass, I would say, well, shit. I would say you should have a limited use, okay, for sure, because you can get so much out of the rest of life, okay. And as with all these drugs in this guide, as I said from the beginning, in part 1, you don't need any of these drugs to have a happy, fulfilling life. Happiness comes from the natural things that humans do. And this is just it's like a little perk on the side. It's just like cake or chocolate or something that some of us get to enjoy. And some of us shouldn't, because you'll get too much of it. But I'm going to say a large portion of people should probably never touch it, like 35%. And probably like 85% of people should not use it more than a few times at most. Have that experience like an adolescent, in college, you smoke some weed in college, whatever. That's the kind of best thing that it's for. Sort of a mind expansive trip around your mind kind of a thing. But you don't, like I said, 85% of people are just not going to benefit. It seems to be something for the more cerebral types. And again, that's a loose definition, but if you're really into thinking, it might be for you. I could imagine easily people who use it on the regular to enhance their ideas in some way or another. I know a lot of people who've tried to use it to, I'll write comedy on weed or draw things, and it doesn't work out. Because the crowd that you're entertaining is not on the stuff. And so you lose the rapport. It puts you in a phase shift type of situation where your rapport, your normal human rapport is mismatched. It's almost like it puts you in a different hertz or something, a frequency that that just is then you have to concentrate to focus your frequency back so that where it matches sober people. Alcohol does the same thing, but weed is more intense in that regard. So, all right, let me see. All right, now, after 100 uses, for those of you in the 15% category who've decided, look, and I'm going to keep using this stuff. After the 100 uses, when you get up into the 1,000 uses and stuff, it changes again. And you can really use it to do a lot of things. I'm going to assert that one of its properties is it has some ability to restructure your internal emotional momentum. Okay, let me say that again. There's some capacity to restructure your internal emotional momentum. And what I mean by that is you have a tendency to do things just like as you walk around because you've been in somewhere before. Let's say you walk into the garage and you see some tools laying out and you go, damn it, and you go over there and you fix the tools or whatever it is. And you're a little irked by that. Now, if you are on weed and you come into that garage, you may have a different experience. Somehow the momentum that would normally carry you over to do something with the tools is changed. It's redirected. The focus is different now, and you're thinking about something else. And what you can do with that disruption is you can learn to direct it and to disrupt bad habits and to create good habits. It's tricky because you're also high while you're doing it, but it is a potential benefit that people can use. So I think people could use marijuana to break out of things like PTSD cycles or other, for lack of a better term, hypnotically induced or habitual emotional cycles. I think it could be used to break those cycles and to establish new patterns that are more beneficial to the individual. Now, let's get into the pitfalls real quick because I'm telling you about some of the benefits and these pitfalls are directly related to the benefits. And so let me tell you a little bit more about the direct benefit. Weed has some strange natural capacity to alleviate your anxiety. It can also make you fucking paranoid because, and that's probably related too. But the general effect is a calming, um, okay, what's a good way to put it? An alleviation of your, let's see, again, the emotional momentum thing, but I'm thinking of something positive here that you use to do things. Okay. Okay. There's a great quote from Jackie Brown, where um, Samuel L. Jackson says to the girl who's smoking weed all the time, "Watch out, that shit'll rob you of your ambition." Okay. Now, that is a very poignant and telling description of one of the biggest pitfalls for weed, and could be a very real, and probably is a very real, accident waiting to happen for long-term or frequent weed users. And what it is if you think about it, right? If this alleviates your anxiety, let's say you have anxiety about something that you're supposed to do, and instead of doing the thing, you smoke the weed. Well, when the weed effect wears off, guess what? You still haven't done the fucking thing, okay? So when it hits you again, it comes back, and it's later in time, and your mind perceives that, and so it's worse, okay? So to the extent that you are avoiding things that are beneficial to you, whether they're responsibilities that you have or ambitions that could improve you, to the extent that you are utilizing the weed and living a different life other than that, you're not growing in those directions, and you're incrementally stumping your growth in that, stumping. You are stunting your growth, okay, in those areas, because you're not incrementally improving when that anxiety hits you, and instead you're escaping into the second realm, whatever it is. And when I say the second realm, the people who are over 1,000 uses will know what I'm talking about. You get to the point of where it's almost like a second personality or a different life, in the sense that reality is a little bit different. There's a lot of people who get up every day and smoke weed like before they even have breakfast, okay? And a lot of them have very productive, happy lives with marriages and kids and all that kind of stuff. I know people who are super successful. I know Molyneux's like, bullshit, you don't know. Yeah, I do. I really do. And it's just, they're fine, okay? They hide it because it's illegal and they're licensing issues and shit like that. But generally speaking, everything is fine in their lives. Now, that being said, would their life be different if they didn't do that? Yeah, I think it would. I mean, I know it would. I don't know. It's hard to say. Can you separate people? I mean, you can. You would have a different life if you didn't have access to that alleviation. Would it be better? It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. But there's definitely been times when, or there will be times if you use the weed, if you smoke the pot, that that you will not do certain things. You'll make choices, and those choices create who you are over the long term, and that is one of the pitfalls. And there are other people. It gets worse. Let me give you some more pitfalls. There are certain people you will meet who are what you would want to call burned out. You wouldn't want to call it that, but you have to call it that, because that's what it kind of looks like. They get into this situation where they're smoking so much weed so often that it numbs their perceptions, and it puts you in a state of mind that is unnatural and inhuman, and it's not fun. And these particular groups, I mean, you can keep yourself there. You can find yourself just smoking the weed when it's not even really doing anything anymore. It's just, you're just there. And maybe it gives you a little bump at first. And Coke is really bad about this shit. When I tell you about Coke and crack, this is the worst pitfall. But if you can imagine that your body has a certain amount of, let's say, serotonin or dopamine or some chemical that provides you with pleasure. And the weed, let's just say, somehow releases some of that chemical, right? Well, then you've got less of it, right? I mean, let's say something else happens, dramatic or fun or whatever. Like you literally don't have the same amount of chemical that you just would have had you not smoked the weed first. You can numb yourself to reality with it in a detrimental way. You can overdo the numbness for sure. And you can keep yourself there. You can maintain that state. But what happens is that it gets worse and worse because the beneficial part just gets lower and lower in terms of experiential value. Lower is not a good description, but less and less intense. And you don't want to be there. And the way out is incremental activity. Okay. You can get people, I've seen people get addicted to thought. Okay. In there, they're thinking so much that it just kind of takes over, and then all they do is think. And it's real because you can create that momentum. I've got a video about habits I should probably link to, and about how changing any habit that you have. It's very useful because you can do it with incremental activity. And that's one of the ways you get out of this zombie state you can get into with weed. And it's the difference between, I describe being stoned and being high. You listen to those two descriptions. Those are two descriptions of what happens when you smoke weed. One is, I'm high. And it feels like high, like you're flying, like you're magical or more powerful or something. It just feels that way. You're not. You can't fly. Don't jump. If you do try to jump from the bottom, right? Just don't jump off of something. Jump up. If you can fly, you should still just float right up, right? But you can't, and so don't. And but you definitely feel that. Now, when you smoke too much, you'll notice. If you take more than a few puffs, if you inhale it more than 3 or 4 times, you're going to get what I would call stoned, and that is that numb feeling where you can't feel anything much, and you're just sort of an observer in life. And again, you've gone too far. You've overdone it. Weed, and I know they've made it a lot stronger than it used to be, but still, you can have a great time. The entire experience on 2 puffs. 2 puffs of good weed, and you're golden. So, now I know there's a lot of real smokers who are like, they're laughing at me right now. But hey, I'm just talking about for everybody here, all right? And in general, I'm going to say, if I had to just say to humans, like I said, I would say to most of y'all, don't try it. I'd probably say 2/3 of you don't even try it. Of the third that tries it, half or more of you, 2/3 of y'all should put it down right after you try it. You just try it so that you know what those fucking people are talking about over there, and then that's about it. Okay, it's almost impossible to relate to without ever having tried it. So, sorry, Molyneux. You're just guessing. You're swinging. You're whiffing, unfortunately. So, all right. Let me see if I covered everything here. So yeah. I mean, let me just to summarize real quick. Uses. Get your adolescent intellectual curiosity out of the way. I've heard some people say it's therapeutic for their joints or whatever else. I've never felt anything like that. I doubt it. I really do. But who am I? If it works for you, man, the CBD people say that works, and CBD is in the stuff. So, Okay, but watch out for those pitfalls. And also remember to get yourself in the right situations. Um, go to a comedy show or something like that, but don't operate heavy machinery. You won't want to be driving that first time. So, all right. That's pretty much it. I hope this helps. I hope you don't get stuck in anything. Don't get stuck. You just get out of it. Trust me, you can get out of it. I'll link to the incremental change video, and so you can get out of it if you get stuck. But anyway, that's it. Enjoy otherwise, and I'll talk to you soon.